Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Bryan Ewing. I'm here again with Justin Cason, and we're coming to you just giving a little help for parents in this time. We know that the social distancing thing has been extended through April 30th, so we're going to be here for a while. And so we just wanted to come to you and give you guys some helpful tips of things that may be going on at home that might not have been going on before your kids were quarantined. And so. Last week, we talked about the idea of healthy communication. That's floating around on the internet. If you want to go on Facebook and find that, it's there. But this week, Justin's gonna talk to us about screen time, not only limiting it, but also being able to use it in a positive way with your team. So let's hear what you got, Justin. I'm excited
Yeah,
about it.
awesome. Yeah, so screen time is obviously something that your kid was probably dealing with before this whole thing happened, but now it's something that as a family, even in my household with my two younger children, we're dealing with this as well. And I want to start off by saying this. Right now, no one is killing it when it comes to screen time, okay? No one's just like, oh, I got it. I'm the Mecca. I know moms who are stay-at-home moms who homeschool their kids, and right now they feel like they're doing nothing but screens. Even though this is their normal life is being at home, it's not normal, and it's okay? With the weather and parents having to work from home, things have changed. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing such a horrible job. You are trying to get by, and that's okay. And the idea for this episode, I guess you would call it, is that we just want to give you some tips and tricks on how to make it a little better, okay? How to help your teen and how to help yourself have good screen time relationships, how it's not always an argument when you tell them to turn off the Xbox, and how to help those things out, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is you have to understand screens from a Generation Z perspective, okay? So you have to understand for us, for me, I'm 32. I got my first cell phone was I was in the 10th grade. And I had the Motorola Razor flip phone that can never be destroyed. And for me, it was like, oh, this is cool new device, right? Well, these kids have never not lived in a time where cell phones were rampant, where screen sizes are massive. They just don't know any better. So for Gen Z, whereas for a lot of us, our cell phones or screens or informational devices, for them, they're really relationship devices, okay? They're devices that they have their most effective relationships on. They're the ones that have the most communication through with their friends and with their teachers, with anyone really, especially now. So they're relationship devices. And also because of that, it's digitally with screens is the most comfortable place for them to have conversations and things like that. It's a time of real renewal. So really, students right now have more comfort digitally than they do in face-to-face interaction. I think we all know this. You have a hard time telling a teenager at this point to look you in the eye because they're not used to looking you in the eye. They're used to being on their phones here, right, on FaceTime, and the phone's always looking at the ceiling. I know when we're doing youth group, we're doing it on Zoom. I've seen more kids ceiling fans than I've ever have in my entire life. Because they just had the phone up. They're not used to looking people in the face when they talk to them. So this comfort also allows teens to be in a different type of mindset in relationship to screens. Now, one thing I want to say is this: every teen is different. It needs to be treated differently. Yeah. So you have to understand that your teen's screen time has to be treated differently. Even if you have two teens, they could be very different in how they use their screen time. Imagine this: if your teen is using their phone a whole lot, but you found out they're reading a book on their Kindle app, that's different than the teen who has not gotten off TikTok for the past 17 days, right? It's a different understanding, different relationship with technology. And really, you want your kids to read more, right? That's a good thing. You're like, yeah, please read a book. Hallelujah. And every teen is different. We have to understand that.
I also wanted to ask, because you mentioned something that I think I didn't think about, that that's pretty profound when you're talking about this generation's their interface and their experience with their device. I mean, you said the first phone you got was in 10th grade. It was a Razor. When I was in 10th grade, a couple of the kids had pagers, but most of us used the pay phones to call. But I mean, you'd mentioned that you had a Razor, and I'm thinking back to my first cell phones. It was like the slide phone, Motorola.
Yeah.
But, and I started thinking about that, and you had mentioned that this generation has a certain experience with their device that that even though we had devices, we didn't have that experience because your Razor wasn't a mini computer. It was a phone.
No.
You could text, you had to hit, 2-3 times to get to the C.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. And so would you say that their interaction with their phones, even though they may be getting phones at the same age that we got phones when we were in high school, that their interface is a bit different because the device itself is more comprehensive?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember the coolest thing when I first got my phone was you could set up a ringtone that was just, whatever you want it to be, a 15-second blurb of your favorite song, which I had a lot of embarrassing songs as my ringtone.
Yeah.
And that was like the coolest thing. Now, when a student gets their cell phone, for one, it's a rite of passage, right? It's like, oh, I'm finally an adult now. That's what they think. I have this cell phone, but at their fingertips is all the information in the world, right? And they have constant video connection. So that's one thing that even for us, using your phone as much for video content, that wasn't something I had to deal with much in college.
Yeah.
Like once I got out of college is when they really started posting a lot of video on YouTube or on Facebook. So where we used to be a text-based generation, right? Because you said, 222-44444, just all that stuff. They are a video-based generation. Their eyes, their ears, they're all constantly being stimulated. Whereas for us, it was not easy to send a text. It was not like, oh, I'm going to do this, even if you were profound in texting at that time. Yeah. For them, they literally just pop on Snapchat, press record, talking to the device, and someone gets that information instantly. So yeah, good point. It's totally different. Even if you're trying to compare phone to phone, it's apples to tangerines. Because it's not even oranges at this point. It's something really different. But yeah, good point. And now, as much as technology can be a good thing, there is reasons to limit it, right? There are reasons to limit technology. There's lack of actual connection when we use our phones. I don't know about you guys, but for work, I've been doing a whole lot of these Zoom meetings, and I can tell you there's a lack of connection even here. Bryan and I have a really good relationship. I consider him a friend, and even sitting here like this, it's not as normal as it would be as we were hanging out, at a Mexican restaurant talking. Right. It's different, right? And if we allow ourselves to only communicate in this way, we use a real lack of connection that we have together. Also, with the rise of this generation, cyberbullying is crazy. I remember there was bullies when I was a kid. I got bullied at one point until I realized I was 6'1". I didn't have to be bullied anymore. But that was because the person that bullied me, I saw them face to face every time it happened, right? Cyberbullying is so dangerous because people can say whatever they want to behind a fake alias and never be found out, right? So our kids are dealing with more bullying and more pressure than ever before. And a lot of that happens on their screens, so
easy to hide behind that handle.
Right. Exactly. Kids who, let's be honest, they couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. They can be extremely mean on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat because no one's going to come and have a conversation with them about that, as we used to have when I was a kid. So it's just different, and that's something that's important to understand as well. Cyberbullying is a really big deal. So we have to try to limit their time on their screens to help protect them from themselves almost, and also allow them to kind of come up for air, if you will, to kind of lift their head up out of the water and breathe for a second.
Yeah. And on cyberbullying, this happens to kids a lot, but it's not only them. Jimmy Kimmel has a whole thing on his show called Celebrity Mean Tweets, where celebrities get on and read these just awful things that people say about them, and love or not love that particular celebrity. Nobody deserves that, right. And so if your kid is suffering with that, it's important to know that you're not in that boat alone. That happens to everybody. So.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And, hearing some of those mean tweets, you're like, wow, this celebrity, right? This is someone who has great influence. They're successful. Yeah. I always see Paul Rudd read mean tweets. I'm like, Paul Rudd's like the nicest guy.
Yeah, right.
He doesn't age. The guy is awesome. And he gets so many mean tweets, but like no one would say that to his face,
Right.
Because he's also buff.
I saw John Cena read one the other day. I was like,
yeah.
Really?
No one's going to say that to John Cena's face.
I dare you to go into a parking lot with John Cena and say that to his face. You'd just be another nail in the ground.
That dude is just wide. He's just a wide individual. Yeah. So to kind of get practical with you guys, I'm going to give you 3 practical things you can do right now to help with screen time for your kids.
Awesome.
And these are, you have to use them to how you need to use them, but it's what we got, right? So first, I want to say, cut them off at night. Cut off screen time at night. Now, teenagers are naturally programmed to stay up late due to their suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is essentially the master clock of the brain. So they're programmed to be night owls. It's weird because they also are programmed to need more sleep at this point than any other time in their life except for when they were babies. Right. That's the biggest growth area. But they're programmed to stay up later. Going to bed at 11 p.m. is average for a teen. It's just they're programmed to stay up later. But what happens is the light from our screens, because of the spectrum it's on, triggers the brain to still think it's daylight outside. So the brain triggers itself as, oh, it's still daylight. We have to stay up. We have to stay up. And they get lack of sleep. They get worse sleep. And they can't function as well. That's why you have really, really groggy teenagers in the morning, because they've been up on their phones, till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And their brain, even when the phone goes away, just like you and I, well, it could still be daylight outside. And it's harder for us to go to sleep as well. So yeah, I think one of the best ways to do this is to have your charging area for your phones in a common space, not just your teen's phone, but your phone as well. We have to model the right behavior. And we're a lot of times the issue is that we are on our phone telling our kids to get off their phone. We have to be able to come together on this, right? So having your cell phone chargers all in the kitchen, and having that time where you come together at night and saying, okay, this is night time for the phones, and go ahead and put them all down together. It shows your teen that you mean business about this as well. It's not just something that you're telling them to do. It's something you want to live out with them. And you too, because of your brain, the light also hurts you. So just having that off. Also, I can tell you there's not been many good text messages or Snapchats that have happened after 10 p.m.
Right.
The Snapchat after dark is not really the best thing, and cyberbullying happens more at night. Other inappropriate texting happens more at night. So just having your teen off the phone after 10 p.m. is a huge thing, because it helps with their sleeping, but also just the social behavior that happens after night. Second thing, establish screen guidelines with your teen, not for your teen, and abide by them as well. I know Bryan last week talked a little bit about having a contract, right? This is what happens. Well, screens need to be a part of that. They mirror you, so you have to walk the walk as well. So sit down with your team and set up a healthy amount of boundaries. Talk to them about what you expect for them to be on their screens even. So not just the fact that it's, screen time, but what's on it. So ask yourself this question. Is your teen allowed to watch a rated R movie on their phone? Because they can on Netflix, right? Let's say you say yes. A teen does not differentiate between a rated R movie and pornography. So is your teen allowed to watch pornography on their phone?
Right.
What about the comedians that you listen to on your phone? Are they allowed to watch those on their phones? Have you and your wife ever sent each other, flirty texts? Are they allowed to do that on their phone? Right. So you need to walk through what that screen time actually is and what you expect for them to actually have on their phone. And it's also important to understand that we might view all screens as equal, but students do not, right? So their phone is the main screen of their life. You can make rules for the phone all day. They may not translate that, though, to the Xbox or the PS4, okay? So you could say, okay, we're going to turn off screens at 10 o'clock. So, okay, cool. They'll come in here, plug their phone in, then go in, turn on the Xbox, hop on. And you're like, well, that's a screen. What are you doing? For them, it's not. It's different. So you have to say, okay, this is also for the Xbox. This is for the computer. This is what we do at this time. And also understanding that there are other times when technology is good. Screen time is not the bad thing. It's when it's used inappropriately. It's the bad thing. So if they use your phone for or their computer for schoolwork, is that count towards their screen time? Should it? What about if they're applying for colleges or doing their FAFSA? You have to be able to have these really outlined things to kind of show them and give them as much guidance as possible, because they do research all the time with teens.
Yeah, we're trying to find a job even.
Yeah, exactly.
Jobs, even before this Corona thing hit, jobs don't want to see you. They want you to apply online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they ask teens tons of times, what's the thing you want from your parents? And they said they want more boundaries. They want more interaction. They want more control. They're looking to you for proper behavior. They want to know what they need to be doing, and they need you to model that for them. So help them understand this is a good thing. This is a not so good thing. I'm not saying you can't spend 2 hours watching cat videos, right? I'm not saying you can't do that. But what happens if, the cat video, you takes you down the YouTube thing, and now all of a sudden you're watching how it's made, and you're watching all the other things that are happening, right? Or the lockpicking lawyer. Like, at what point does a teen need to come up for air and say, okay, I've been here for too long, or, oh, I got into a situation. And if they get into a situation where what they see on their screen is not what you want them to see, what do?
Right.
Are they ashamed and they don't want to talk to you about it? Do they say, hey, mom, dad, I was doing this and this popped up? That way you can have the interaction with them. And that's why you need to have this contract, and it needs to be something that you work with your teen on. It's not just a, hey, this is what I have for you. Please sign this here. It's a conversation. And if you need help with that, you can reach out to one of us. We'll help you set up that contract together. But it's really important to have some way to have screen guidelines so your teen knows what's expected of them. Last, and this is something that I think is huge, especially for parents of the teenagers that I get to work with as a youth pastor. They will ask their kid, well, how was youth group? Fine. And that's all. How was camp? And while I'm at camp, I see them crying their eyes out and raising their hands, praising Jesus, and they've recommitted their life. And they get home, it was good. That's all it is, because teens are having a really hard time communicating. Right? Use what they have on their screen to get into deeper and meaningful conversations. Be interested, ask questions, use their intake of screen time as a way into their lives. If your teen watches a show, so like my wife and I, we are currently watching The Masked Singer. I'm not sure why I got hooked into this.
Yes, you did.
But I'm excited. I'm not gonna lie to you. We have an episode we watch it the day after, so tonight's our night.
Are you up?
No, we did not watch last night, so we're gonna watch that.
Well, I won't.
Please don't. Gosh, it better not be the turtle. It's my favorite. But yeah, so find out what your kid's watching. If your kid's watching Tiger King, ask questions about Tiger King. Hey, I see this all over the internet. What do you think about it? Do you think Carol Baskin really killed her husband? Like, do you think that's actually what happened? Well, how do you feel about, the idea of cats being kept in captivity? Is that okay with you? Is it not okay with you? And you can find out who they really are and what they really value from the things that they watch. If a celebrity in a show that they love, right, gets in trouble, ask them about that. How do you feel about that? Does that make you sad? For me, one of the most unique things I've experienced as an adult is when Robin Williams died.
Yeah.
Because people who were not really friends with Robin Williams, I'm not a friend of Robin Williams. He didn't know who I was, but were deeply affected by that because of how we viewed him in entertainment, right? As Genie or Patch Adams or a myriad of other characters, right? So to see someone who brought so much joy die was really devastating for a lot of people, right? Especially how he died.
Yeah, that's right.
So imagine that happening again. What if you use that as a platform to talk to your son or daughter about suicide, about depression and anxiety? Using what they have already in front of them as a means to enter into their life, that's gold. And we can't just let that go. We can't just say, oh, we're not going to have to worry about that. They watch their weird Adventure Time, Rick and Morty stuff. I don't have to pay attention to all that kind of stuff. Get involved and use what they already are doing on screen time to really get into their lives.
And the other thing that opens up is an opportunity for them to practice healthy communication with you. And then that builds trust. And so when something pops up on their screen, like you had said, what did they do in that moment? If you've built that trust with them, that affords them to be able to come to you and feel that it's a safe place to come to you and go, hey, this happened here, without you flying off the handle and it becoming a problem for them, And so, healthy conversations from those things I think is fantastic.
And I think it's also, when I'm on internet, right? When I'm online, there are times where I get to a website and I'm like, how did I get here? And I'm a pretty tech savvy person. I know computers pretty well, I know the internet pretty well. But I'm like, at what point did a pop-up happen that got me to this location, right? So that can happen to our teens just as much, So they could get to a situation where, like, oh no, if I tell mom or dad about this, they're going to be mad at me.
Right.
What if I need to tell mom and dad about this so we can talk about it? Would be the better response. But yeah, last thing on screen time, be careful of what you read regarding their app usage. I'll say it like this. So I've seen so many posts about how horrible Snapchat is. And don't get me wrong, Snapchat can be horrible. It can be. But if you teach your kid how to properly use screen time, how to properly set up their own boundaries, it won't be. So just because there's a new app doesn't mean that app's the devil. When the radio was first introduced, right? People were like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Literally, it was protested. Mm-hmm. The radio. And now no one even cares about radio anymore because it's all streaming digital, right? But every time something new comes out, it's the devil. And it has nothing to do with the thing. It's because we're not setting up proper guidelines for our kids, not showing them how to have the right conversations, and not setting them up for success. So, Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram or whatever. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. As a youth pastor, this is one of the questions I get the most. Hey, should I let my kid be on Snapchat?
Right.
Should I let my kid be on TikTok? And I'm like, hey, I'm on Snapchat. I have a TikTok. I haven't TikToked a lot, but I have one because I think for me, and Bryan, I think you can agree with this as well, we have to know where they are.
Right.
We have to know where they are, know what they're experiencing to be able to have that conversation, because we're also trying to do the same thing. We're trying to use what they see to have meaningful conversations about the gospel. That's our entire job, is to, adapt the gospel to their worldview so they can see Christ in their own way and see the truth of Christ in that way as well. So that's just a last thing on that. Anything else to add, Bryan?
Well, you were talking about how radio was being protested, which is a funny thing. 10 years ago, a lot of pastors were like, Facebook is the devil. And now they're like, join our live stream on Facebook.
Yeah. I remember being at a conference and someone saying that, live streaming the sermon does not let the Holy Spirit come through it.
Yeah.
And literally the person is now on Facebook Live. So it's because we had to pivot, right? And it turns out that's not as important as we thought it was when push comes to shove. So yeah, especially during this time, good thing. I'm glad you brought this up. During this time is a great time for us to start these guidelines. Yeah. To understand right now, maybe have a little bit bigger space, right? Open up the gates a little bit more because let's be honest, you need them to go watch a movie because if you don't, you might not have a child anymore, right? Some of us are getting really frustrated with our teens and our non-teens. So at this time, when you're making these guidelines, set them up in a way that's healthy for this time. And then tell your team, look, this is going to get us through this quarantine thing, and then we're going to have a better conversation about it. So if you realize there's areas that you're not really happy with, that you want more in, or that, I'm not really using that much time, we'll talk about this when this is over and remake a new one for our everyday lives.
Yeah, and I remember when 9/11 happened. We weren't the same.
No.
I feel like this is going to be the same sort of situation where this thing is happening. We're in quarantine right now, and people are talking about going back to normal. I think we're going to have a new normal.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be the normal that we had before. And so during this time where we're stuck, quarantined in this house and in this area, what are we going to do with this time? What's that new normal going to look like when, these regulations get loosened up? Are we going to go to a normal where the normal is our kids don't trust us, don't talk to us, and go do what they want and are wayward? Or is the new normal going to be, we spent this time building in healthy, boundaries with screen time, with all the stuff. And when our kids go back to, being able to integrate with one another, they're going to feel free to come to us with their problems, with their concerns, and outbreaks. So we have an opportunity to build that new normal up now, and what we do now drastically will impact what that new normal will look like on the other side of the fence.
Right, we're making that as we speak. So yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, that's what I got for today. Bryan, next week you're talking about?
Next week we're looking over anxiety and depression. I will reemphasize next week that I am not a certified counselor on this, so I'm going to be talking kind of from two areas. Number one, from experience. We've experienced both anxiety and depression in my household. And then I'm going to look through and kind of present some clinical things that we can do, especially for our teens. It's really, really important to understand that the time that they're going through right now, that they don't necessarily have the tools in their tool belt to be able to deal with a lot of the anxiety and depression that they, a lot of them are dealing with. So, so we'll look at it next week and kind of unpack that a little bit and hopefully help out in some way.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll hope to see you guys next week. Have a great time. Talk to you guys later.
Take care, guys.